Thank you, Cahirlock, and I welcome the opportunity to contribute to this second stage debate tonight on the public sector management appointment of senior members of Garda Síochána Bill 2014. This bill sets out to actually remove the appointment of senior Garda officers from the political process and depoliticise those appointments. And funny enough, when I was thinking about actually what I was going to say here tonight, I was reminded of actually a GP, very well-known GP in southwest Donegal, who sadly now is deceased, and who's very highly respected doctor and GP, and helped very many people around the area. But he also was an avid Fianna Fáil supporter and attempted to run for Fianna Fáil on a number of occasions in the local elections. But I heard him on local radio a good few years ago now. He was talking on local radio and bemoaning the fact about how Fianna Fáil had lost its way. And he was bemoaning the fact that at one time you could rely on the fact that your local postman was Fianna Fáil, that your local council worker was Fianna Fáil, that your local bus errand driver was Fianna Fáil, that your local county council official was Fianna Fáil, and that by extension your local Garda was Fianna Fáil. And that's the extent of political patronage that there was, and probably to a certain extent may still be here in this society right across the country. And I welcome the fact that our local postman isn't Fianna Fáil and that our local council workers aren't Fianna Fáil anymore. But by the same token, I don't want them to be Fine Gael or Labour or Independents either. I want them to be there in the job because they were the best person who did the interview for the job at the time that it was advertised. And that's what's wrong with our whole society, and I think that's what's wrong within the Gardaí as well, that whole political appointment system is there, and that whole political appointment system has been sustained. And sadly, I think the only difference between Fine Gael and Labour and Fianna Fáil is that Fine Gael and Labour didn't get the chance to do it as often, and that it hasn't been able to be doing there. And I think a lot of the time Fine Gael aspired to be Fianna Fáil and to be as good as them at doing what they were doing and being the power mongers and holding on to the power. So this bill sets out to have an independent process of appointing senior members of the Gardaí, which I think is welcome and should happen. And Deputy Ross has outlined that, as he would envisage it, that the structure would be very simple and would ensure that people are appointed on merit. Well, certainly nobody could dispute that and see anything wrong with that. And I think that's absolutely right. Positions of Senior Garda would have to be advertised by a board of 3 members from the Standards and Public Office Commission with 2 additional members, and they would report to the Dáil with a recommendation of a candidate. And again, I don't see anything wrong with that. And I think, when some members across the floor have talked about Deputy Ross attempts to depoliticise the appointment process, and then in the same breath they say, well, how come I haven't had somebody appointed by the Dáil, that actually is politicising it again. But it's actually not, I don't think, and when you actually think about it, because the political process that takes place now takes place behind closed doors. It takes place in secret. It's a process of people ingratiating themselves into the political system and into their political masters and their masters within the Department of Justice, and benefiting through the promotions to get ultimately to be to the position of Commissioner. And what would happen if an appointment had to come before the Dáil? It would mean that politicians would have to stand up in public and actually cast their vote on whether this person would get the job or not. So if they weren't of the right political colour, they would have to vote against them, and they'd have to be scrutinised for why they actually voted against the person. So in effect, that would depoliticise the process, and it would make the process open and transparent, and people would be able to see why decisions have been made. But yet, what we have in the current system, and I was shocked when Deputy Ross mentioned a number of weeks ago that someone in the region of about 200 senior Garda appointments are actually appointed by the political process. So the whole culture within the Garda organisation is there and built into politics and built into political patronage. And that is wrong. It does a disservice to the Gardaí, it does a disservice to the citizens of the state, and it does a disservice to anybody that ends up having to deal with the Guards for whatever purpose. And that system needs to change. And I was kind of disappointed to see in the Minister's contribution last night, and I read through it again today just to see that she actually didn't. She only mentioned the appointment of the Commissioner, I think, in one sentence in her contribution last night, and didn't deal with the issues of how she would envisage or how she would see that senior appointments could be made within the Gardaí in the future, under the new legislation that's coming forward. And now the Minister might possibly use the excuse to say that she's involved in the consultation process and she doesn't want to preempt the outcome of it. But I think the Minister should have some views and should be able to express those views to the House here as to how she sees an appointments process, or even just simply one sentence to say that the appointments process of all those top senior Gardaí will be done in an independent and an impartial manner. And that would be a very simple thing. So then we could sit back and say, right, okay, this is going to be dealt with in the legislation that's going to come forward before the end of the year to set up the Garda Authority. And then we could have some faith that that political patronage system will be taken out of the Gardaí. But unfortunately, the Minister outlined a lot of the reforms which has taken place and a lot of the reforms she's initiated. But on that point, she was very silent in her contribution. And I do believe that the Minister will attempt to make the changes. I hope that she will resist what will be the kickback from the people who see the benefit, the Department of Justice, from the senior Gardaí themselves, that she will resist them and be able to force through the changes and the amendments that are required to make the system actually fair and accountable and transparent. And there's no doubt that the members on this side of the House will support that if we can see that that is what's actually been attempted to be achieved, and that's what's going to be very important. And I welcome the fact that the Minister has embarked on the consultation process, and actually the fact that she has invited Justice for All to address the event in Farmlee this Friday. I think that's progressive of her, and I think it's something that should be welcomed. But Justice for All needs to be listened to as well, and action needs to take place in relation to the families, and the very many families right across the country that have suffered at maladministration, malpractice, and in some cases illegal practices being carried out and dealing with their family members in very tragic circumstances, many of them. So they have to be not only brought to Farmlee and present to the consultation there, they have to be listened to, and they have to make sure that what they are demanding for is dealt with. And then if that does mean that there has to be a wide-ranging commission of investigation to hear their cases and to hear their stories and to come back with recommendations in relation to it, I think that's a very worthwhile process that we should be involved in, and that while it will take time, it's a process that we need, because it's a process not only of getting things right, but it's also a process of giving some healing and giving some closure to those families as well, so that they can attempt to move on from the wrongs that were done to them. I think in the Minister and her changes, one of the things that I would like to see come forward and the changes that take place within the Gardaí as well, and if we are getting a wide-ranging reform, it's a situation where the Gardaí are also our security service in this state. I think that needs to change. I think that the fact that the Gardaí are supposed to be a democratically accountable policing service for the citizens of the state, but yet they are also the security service and operating in the security circles. I think that builds in this culture of we have to close ranks, and that we're not going to allow things, and you can't allow things to come out because we don't want to expose what we're actually doing here, what we're actually monitoring, who we're looking at, stuff like that. So I think we can have a security service maybe that's attached to the army. They already have security service within the army anyway. Or we could have an independent security service if that's so vitally important to have. But I think it does need to be separated from the Gardaí, and that would go a long way to ensuring that the Gardaí could be more accountable as well. Because when you hear some of the ridiculous things that are put down to state security, like how much the Commissioner's office costs to run every year, or we can't answer that because that's a state security issue. That's just nonsensical. The Commissioner's office and the cost of running it should be accountable and should be there for everyone to see. But while we have the state security apparatus tied in with the Gardaí and the Garda service, this will continue, and this will allow the culture to continue, and the culture that has prevailed within the Gardaí to continue on. So I think the Minister has a lot of work to do. I think this bill could contribute to the actual process, and if the Minister could indicate that all the appointments that are mentioned in this bill were actually going to be done as part of an open and transparent process under the new Garda authority. That may go some way to satisfying the need for this bill to be brought in and this bill to be put in place. But we need to end the culture of political patronage wherever it takes place, whether it's in the Gardaí, whether it's in the councils, whether it's in An Post or any of the other state services. We need to make sure that it ends.